Martina here, and in this episode we are going to talk about paper. There are three main things to consider when choosing your paper. The first is what type of paper you want and what is right for you. The second is the format of the paper. And finally, there is the paper grain and why that is important for your book. As you're watching this course and you want to make a book, I'm sure you have an idea of what you want to use your book for, whether it's watercolor or acrylic painting or drawing, sketching, writing. Whatever it is, you have to choose the right paper for you. For me personally, I really love to draw, paint, write, do everything in my sketchbooks. So I usually go for something like this. This is sketchbook paper, 150 GSM, so it's quite on the thicker side. 150 GSM just determines how thick the paper is. So that's the marker you will have to look for. I think you can use every type of paper you want, watercolor paper, sketchbook paper, drawing paper, whatever. The only thing I would not recommend is using regular copy paper. That is only 80 GSM, meaning it's very thin and it tears very easily, and when you write on it you can usually see it on the other side, which is not very nice and not what you want from a sketchbook. No matter what type of paper you choose, it's important that it is acid-free. Acidic paper will deteriorate over time, so choosing acid-free paper will make sure that it holds up better. I think it's a good thing to just try out some different types of paper before you buy a whole stack, so that you can make sure that it will work for the mediums you want to use in it. Next up, you have to choose the format of your book. Now, I think this is mainly a matter of preference and what you intend to use your book for. So for example, you can go for a small square format, like this one, or you can go for a full, landscape format. You get a very wide spread. Or you can use the more common A5 format. I think this is probably one of the most fun parts because you can be really creative about the shape of your book. But as you can see, there's a really different feeling to a landscape format from this format, and the way they open up is also different. So again, I think you have to consider your needs, what you want to use your book for, and what your preferences are when choosing your format. So finally, let's talk a little bit about the grain of the paper. So inside the paper there are fibers that lay in a certain direction. And when the paper is made, especially with these kind of modern papers, the grain direction is very often along the paper. So in these sketchbooks, the grains often go in this direction. If you're uncertain about which direction the grain is going in your sketchbook, you can test it out by grabbing a piece of the paper. You can feel that with the direction the grain is going, it's a lot easier to fold it along the grain. If you go across the grain, you will feel that there is more bounce and more resistance to folding. The grain of the paper should go parallel to the spine. The reason for that is when paper gets moist, either from humidity in the air or from the glue in the bookbinding process, the fibers in the paper expand, and so when it's folded along the grain, they will expand outwards and towards the fore-edge, meaning this side of the book. So if the paper is folded against the grain, then the paper will expand up and down, and that can cause the pages to warp and become a bit wavy and even tear a bit over time. If the paper gets wavy, the book might have problem closing together. You should keep in mind the grain direction when choosing your end pages as well. Just as a little side note to the topic of paper grain, with the books I have made that have stained paper, I have not had the same problem because the pages are already a bit wavy. And also with those books I usually make some kind of clasp or a buckle to close the book, so the problem of not being able to close it is not really an issue either. So the basic structure of a book consists of a text block, which is the main paper of the book that is either glued or sewn together. At either end of the text block you have the end sheets, and those end sheets are connected to the covers. So if we look at this book, we can see that there is a sheet of colored paper attached to the text block as well as the cover of the book. Traditionally, end sheets were usually marbled paper. You've probably seen it because it has a very distinct look to it. With certain sewing methods and bookbinding methods, the end sheets are reinforced with fabric or more paper, thicker paper. What I like to use personally are these large sheets of cardstock. They are somewhere around 200 or 250 GSM. And finally, where do you find all this stuff? Unfortunately, I can't share a link with you because I buy my stuff locally. The sketchbooks I usually source from my local bookstores because they also sell some basic art supplies. If they don't have it there, I will go to an art store or a hobby store. They always have sketchbooks and watercolor books. The end paper too I also buy at the local bookstore. If they don't have it there, I will go to Staples or some office supply stores because they usually have some thicker cardstock that is used to make signs and stuff, and that can work as well. So finally, just to summarize, get a type of paper to suit your needs, whether that is watercolor paper, drawing paper, sketching paper, whatever. Get paper that is acid-free. It's usually marked on the package. If not, you can ask the store where you buy it from. Choose a format that you are comfortable with and that suits your needs and preferences. And finally, take into consideration the grain of the paper.